Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Legacy Warriors podcast. Now, I want to say right off the bat that this is not the type of episode I wanted to drop as the first one, but my hands are a little bit tied in terms of the time that I have to dedicate this week, as I do have my in-laws visiting from out of town. But I did not want to forego this podcast because I did promise it to you guys. And I do want this to be your reliable stop in terms of getting information on the upcoming LFA and Cage Warriors cards. Thus, still dropping it with no video or really any graphics, but I promise you can expect much better production in the second episode of the Legacy Warriors podcast. So please do ensure that you return to the channel when there is another Cage Warriors or LFA event scheduled. With that said, I have decided to start the Legacy Warriors podcast to give shine to the guys over there at LFA and Cage Warriors because of the high-level prospects they continue to churn out on a weekly basis on every calendar year. They can be accredited for a lot of the top talent that has come into the UFC or the guys that actually perform on the Contender series, and following these promotions over the last couple of years very closely the way I have has given me the respect that I believe I should be giving to them and showcasing and giving them the props they deserve on my YouTube channel. So the birth of the Legacy Warriors podcast came in 2025. So very happy to cover both of those promotions here. Again, breaking down every single fight that they have on this 2025 schedule and maybe seeing what it transforms into in a few months. Maybe getting a couple fighters on or something, interviewing a few of them ahead of their fights. But first and foremost, I want to start breaking down these matchups and giving you guys somewhere to come to every LFA and Cage Warriors fight week. So with that said, like I said, I don't have too many resources at my disposal, so I want to get through these breakdowns as quickly as possible this week, but I promise the second episode will be much better production. Obviously, we'll have my video available as well, and I'll get a little bit more in depth about each fighter, but given the restricted time that I had this week, I tried getting through the studying as best as I could, and in terms of breaking it down for you guys right now, again, working with limited time here, so I want to get through it as quickly as possible, and hopefully we're still able to cash some tickets. And again, I will have official plays for these, for this card actually, on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. So if you want to, not have to decipher which plays I feel strongest about, make sure you guys check out the link in the description below for that. And yeah, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right to it so I can drop this podcast for you guys. So there's 12 fights in total. Let's start off with the first fight on the card, which goes between Sheila Ladd coming in at minus 1,500 going up against Tailando Mattress, who comes in at plus 850. No need to spend too much time on this one. Sheila Ladd is actually the younger brother of former UFC fighter and current PFL signee Aspen Ladd, and he showcases just as aggressive of a grapple-heavy approach, working with guys like Anthony Hernandez and Max Griffin on a daily basis, coming in with a 10-0 amateur record. I believe his pro debut will go just as well as his amateur record showcases, as I believe Tailando Mattress is more of a slugger and will leave those openings that Ladd can take advantage of. But at minus 1,500, it's hard to make a clear case as to why we should be parlaying him, as I really don't like parlaying anything more than 700 or minus 700, no matter what the discrepancy is, because of the volatility of MMA. But as a prediction, we're going to go Sheila Ladd. Next up, Esmira Mammadova coming in at plus 180, going up against Gabrielle McComb, coming in at minus 220. Mammadova went 4-2 as an amateur under the IMMAF banner. She looks a little bit long, lanky, has average striking game. Grappling is a little bit of a question mark, and that's what she's going to be tested in as she takes on 27-year-old second-degree BJJ black belt Gabrielle McComb. Now, McComb looks strong, powerful, and very physical, but the fact of the matter is there is no MMA tape available on her at all, as she has never had any amateur fights or pro fights. Thus, we are kind of blind with what she brings to the table. I believe she will be able to showcase her BJJ here by getting this fight to the mat, but it's very hard to justify why to play a minus 220 when you have absolutely no MMA film on a fighter, especially to figure out whether they can take a punch, and secondly, whether they have the cardio to implement the advantage that they'll have. And in this case with McComb, will she be able to utilize her wrestling to get to her jiu-jitsu, or will she gas out trying to do that? So I got to pass on this matchup, but you guys are looking for a prediction. I'm going to go with McComb, but I can't place a bet on it. All right, next up, Czar Charles coming in at minus 225, going up against Ulysses Alves, who comes in at plus 185. Charles suffered his first professional defeat last time around by getting caught in a guillotine, but it seemed like he was kind of panicking because he couldn't get to his primary game plan, and that eventually saw him fall into a guillotine choke. Normally, he's a very athletic and smothering grappler, but also showcases some solid striking skills, and he's going to have to lean on that here against Alves, who is a second-degree BJJ black belt. Obviously, Alves will be looking to get this fight to the ground, but I was not that impressed with the wrestling that we saw from him in his lone professional MMA matchup last March, where he ended up abandoning the grappling and actually throwing big haymakers and eventually catching his opponent and knocking him out halfway through the first round. But I do believe that Charles is the faster and more powerful fighter, and if he can keep this fight upright, he should be able to catch Alves slacking here and eventually find a big shot to put him away. But again, minus 225 is a little bit wide for me here, especially considering how dangerous Alves can be and how reckless he is. He might be able to catch Charles off guard here or even land a takedown, which could allow him to get a dominant position. But I do believe Charles is the better, well-rounded mixed martial artist, but I just can't get behind that minus 225. But I'm expecting him to knock out Alves probably in the second round. Next up, Julio Larrave coming in at minus 165, going up against Alan Silhanek, who comes in at plus 135. Now, this is a matchup between two guys that love to grapple and love to scramble. I cannot wait for this matchup, as I'm hoping the LFA showcases it first and foremost. But secondly, both guys do a great job in terms of establishing the grappling, but sometimes they get a little bit over-aggressive and give up some bad spots. But they stay disciplined and patient and eventually work out of those spots, creating scrambles and getting back to dominant positions. I am slightly more impressed by Julio here, which is why I'm going to lean with him here at minus 165. And I do think he is the better fighter overall, specifically with his grappling, though, which I believe he'll be able to get the advantage of in this fight. Again, I expect it to be back and forth, so I can't completely be confident in terms of making a bet on this matchup, but I am going to have to go with Julio and look for him to get, just a notch ahead in most of the exchanges to get the dominant positions or even threaten with some submissions. But I'm going to go with Larrave here to end up getting his hand raised. Next up, Abraham Del Toro coming in at minus 155, going up against Jermaine Edwards, who comes in at plus 125. And it was very fun to watch the tape on Del Toro, considering how well he grapples and scrambles and often finding ways to put opponents into compromising positions. He's slimy, slippery, and very tough to get a hold of, which is why he often finds reversals, scrambles, and ways to get to dominant positions. His striking is not too bad, although his striking defense could use a little bit of work, especially with his lone amateur defeat coming by a 3-second head kick KO in June 2023. But I'm sure he's learned a big lesson in that matchup, and since then he's been able to go out there and go on a 5-fight amateur winning streak. He goes up against Jermaine Edwards, who I believe it trains out of American Kickboxing Academy, but mainly showcases a very solid power striking game. He's long, lanky, and has put out his first two opponents in 21 seconds and 10 seconds respectively, but he did go on a 3-fight losing streak where he ended up getting submitted in 2 of those matchups and showcasing some of the flaws in his grappling game. I do have to lean with Del Toro here, as I believe his advantages in the grappling realm and the flaws that we've been seeing from Edwards will open up some opportunities for Del Toro to put him in bad positions, maybe find a submission or a ground and pound finish, but I do believe Del Toro's grappling will be the difference maker here. Next up, Sheldon Struble coming in at plus 140, going up against Edmund Kwan, who comes in at minus 160. Now, Struble originally, I believe, trained out of Strong Style Gym in Cleveland, Ohio, I should say. Same gym as Stipe Miocic, but it seems like he's moved down to New Mexico and started training at Jackson Wink. He comes from a wrestling background, and you can clearly see that when he throws down, and he showcases a very solid striking game as well for somebody that originally comes from a wrestling background. He, I believe, moved to Jackson Wink to sharpen up those striking tools because his wrestling is already so good, and I think he's going to have to showcase the defensive aspect of his wrestling here against a very strong and physical Edmund Kwan. Kwan is just a beast of a man with how just stacked this guy is, and often goes out there and just puts his opponents in bad positions with his strength and his grappling. That leads to him to either getting submission victories or just grinding opponents out. And on the feet, he looks very robotic and a little bit stiff with his striking, which often leaves him open to getting countered and touched up by better technical strikers. I believe Struble will have to lean on his defensive wrestling here to keep this fight upright, which is what I believe he will be successful with. And then from there, I think he's going to start touching up Kwan on the feet, and either he goes on to win a late finish here or ends up winning this fight on the scorecards. I believe that the public is very privy on Struble as well, considering he went from about plus 220 to now plus 140 the night before the fight. I'm going to have to agree with them, and I think he ends up winning this matchup by pulling away late. Next up, Larry Gonzales coming in at minus 110, going up against Billy Ray Valdez, who comes in at minus 110. It's a pick'em fight here in the heavyweight division. Both guys like to slug it out, but I do believe that Valdez is the better technical boxer here. I think that he'll be able to really put it on Gonzales, and I think that will actually lead to a knockout victory for Valdez. Valdez trains out of Fit NHB, which is the same gym as Tim Means down there in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I think that Gonzales, again, moves well for a guy as big as he is and showcases decent cardio, but he is a little bit hittable, and I think if Valdez can get into a groove, he can really land some big combinations and some big shots, which I think will ultimately lead to him getting a knockout victory. Give me Billy Ray Valdez, and I think he gets it done within 7.5 minutes. Next up, Saeed Magomed Abdulgaziev going up against Theo Haig. Haig coming in as a crazy minus 3,300 favorite, and I believe that is justified here, as Abdulgaziev, although he has that Magomed in his name, is not a great wrestler, and he's going to succumb to the pace and pressure of Haig, which will lead to Haig getting a quick finish probably within the first 4 minutes. I love the under 1.5 in this matchup. Obviously, minus 3,300, you should not be ever considering parlaying, again, considering the volatility of mixed martial arts, but I'd be very surprised if Haig slips up on this one. I'm expecting him to go out there, smash Abdulgaziev quickly, and hopefully help us cash an under 1.5 ticket. All right, next up, this one I'm going to butcher, and I apologize, but we're going to go Engtur Bayartsogt. Butchered it. Going up against Shavkal or Churchaev, who comes in at plus 155. The Mongolian fighter is a guy that's coming into his LFA debut while riding a 3-fight winning streak. He started his career 0-2, took a 3.5-year hiatus, and has returned and put together a 7-2 run. This guy loves throwing down in the pocket and loves exchanging big shots with his opponents and trying to create wars. And I believe a lot of that has to do with his Mongolian heritage and where his warrior spirit comes from. He does show a decent understanding of the grappling game, which I believe will help him big time in this matchup against Churchaev, who will likely be looking to take this fight to the ground. Although his name does end with Iev, this is not a guy that I will rely on to showcase a very strong wrestling game. He shoots desperation takedowns, often gets reversed and finds himself in bad positions, and I'm kind of surprised the LFA is bringing a fighter like this into the promotion. With that said, I still have some question marks about the Mongolian fighter, considering his willingness to go out there and slug it out, and that could leave some openings for Churchaev to actually land some big shots of his own. I'm going to still have to lean with the Mongolian fighter here, but at minus 180, I'm just a tad skeptical, and, again, I feel kind of confident in him, but I can't seem to get to the betting window on him either, but he should win this matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised if he overwhelms Churchaev and actually gets him out of there in the second or third round. Next up, Rafael do Nascimento coming in at minus 600, going up against Brandon Altomore, who comes in at plus 425. Now, do Nascimento is 0-2 in LFA title fights, but he hopes to remind the LFA this weekend that he's still deserving in a headlining spot and probably another title fight if he can put together a couple more wins. He normally showcases a huge power punching style to touch up his opponents, but last time around he utilized a heavy grappling approach to keep his opponent on his back and just completely grind him out. John Sweeney, in the last title fight that do Nascimento was in, was able to utilize his speed and striking advantage to touch up do Nascimento, and I believe that's what pushed do Nascimento to go to his grappling in his next fight, which proved to be successful for him. It is also worth mentioning that he has a win over current he has a win over current UFC prospect Marcus McGee, and I believe that was the only loss on McGee's record as well. Altomore is a BJJ specialist who looks to make his UFC or LFA debut here while putting together a 4-fight winning streak. He lost his first pro fight, getting grinded out and showcasing that he's a little bit too confident in his grappling, which could work to his detriment against guys that he might not be able to submit. And I believe he's going to run into that trouble here against Nascimento, hence why Nascimento finds himself as such a big favorite. The spot that I'm kind of keen on is the over 1.5 around that minus 105 mark. I think Altomore's BJJ will be able to keep him safe on the mat, but I believe Nascimento will look to grind him out and keep him there. The only thing keeping me a little bit skeptical is if Nascimento looks to utilize his striking here, which I believe is where he has a big advantage over Altomore. He could probably walk him down and try to put on a statement and try to get him out of there with the striking, but I do think that we'll actually see him lean on that grappling once again, which was successful for him last time, and I think that he'll be safe enough in terms of defending the submissions that are coming back his way. But I do believe the LFA veteran here should be able to give the LFA debutant a hard time and end up winning this fight probably in the either late third round, or he ends up winning this fight by decision. All right, co-main event here, we have Josh Hokit coming in at minus 700 going up against John Lopez, who comes in at plus 500. And I've been impressed with Hokit from what I've been seeing through his first 2 professional fights. In his first matchup, he was struggling to get to his wrestling, but he didn't fret. He didn't shoot desperation takedowns, but he rather stuck to the basic striking game, and that opened up the rest of his game for him. Eventually, in the third round, he got to his wrestling and quickly found a submission after that. And in his last matchup, he set up his takedowns very well and eventually found another submission there. He trains out of the Jackson Wink team. I believe he wrestled collegiately as well. Not as high level as his brother Isaiah, who's obviously a much smaller fighter, but I am excited about the potential that Hokit has and how far he can take this MMA game, especially considering how he's mastered the basics thus far. He goes up a guy in John Lopez, who probably has one of the funnier nicknames I've seen on the regional scene, as his nickname is Big for Nothing. But this guy does a great job in terms of utilizing his big power and trying to put opponents away. His last win came via injury last year, so he's looking to actually legitimize himself with the proper win here, and he could spoil Josh Hokit's potential if he's able to land a big shot. Unfortunately, I think Hokit's a little bit too good for him. I think he's a little bit faster, and I think he'll eventually be able to open up that takedown, which I believe Lopez will be unable to get up from under. I like Hokit in this spot. I think he grinds out Lopez. I think he puts on a solid pace and eventually gets him out of there in the second or third round. All right, and that brings us to our main event here between Ari Farias, who comes in at minus 110, going up against Eric Viscondi, who comes in at minus 110. We got a pick 'em fight here, and there seems to have been a ton of action that came on Viscondi. I believe when I originally studied this matchup a few days ago, he was at plus 135, and it seems like the public is very high on him here, bringing him down to that pick'em line. We'll start off on Farias, who's a high-level BJJ black belt. His last LFA appearance actually was for a title, it was not for a title. It was a main event slot where he came up short against John Sweeney. Farias, obviously very powerful guy, looking to take opponents to the ground and utilizes BJJ. His striking is just a lot of big power blitz shots, not really much method to his madness there. He did return to Struble, Brazil after that loss in the LFA to pull off 2 straight victories, most recently winning the Struble, Brazil Bantamweight Championship. And now he's coming back to the LFA to try to right his wrongs from his last matchup. Now he goes up against Eric Viscondi, who actually is 7-1 since 2021, with his last win coming over a Kyrgyzstani fighter in the LFA. He landed some big shots. Although he normally looks to take opponents to the ground and utilize his submission game, he chose to just try to crash the pocket as often as he could and land big enough shots to try to put that guy away. But he was unable to do so, but still managed to get his hand raised on the scorecards. He's not that bad. He's tough. He's durable. He just turned 28 back in November, but he is a guy that can be grinded out, as we've seen in the past, and I think that's what Farias is going to be able to be successful with here. Obviously, if this fight gets into deeper waters, Viscondi could land some big shots that could cause Farias some trouble, but I think that we'll see Farias try to stay in more comfortable and safe positions, and I think there will be numerous times where he ends up getting the back of Viscondi, and I think that actually ends up with him submitting the other Brazilian fighter here. So I do like Farias. I do like the fact that his line has come down a lot. Originally at minus 165, I wasn't too hot on actually playing that number, considering some of the cardio issues we've seen from him in the past and the striking disadvantage he'll be at in this matchup. But I think I think he'll stay away from that cardio issue, and I think he'll actually get it done within 2 rounds here. So give me Farias and Farias by submission, and at minus 110, I'm happy to take a shot on him there. All right, there you guys go. Quick run through of LFA 199. Again, I want to get this to be a little bit better of a show with better production, a little bit more in depth information on all of these guys. But my hands were just a little bit tied this week, so look for the next edition of the Legacy Warriors podcast. I believe that's going to be coming in the form of the big LFA 200, which goes down January 25th. So look forward to seeing some solid production and just a better podcast than this inaugural edition, but I wanted to get it out for you guys just so I could. So appreciate the love, appreciate the support. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know if you're going to be digging these LFA and Cage Warriors podcasts that I'll be dropping for you guys. Yeah, let's get it. Appreciate the love, appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for a ton of content that I'll be dropping for the UFC card. We'll have the quick picks video dropping, we'll have the free parlay dropping, and then we'll have the prop drop in as well. So stay tuned for that. All right, good luck on all your action this weekend, folks, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Peace.